My name is Emily Turner. I'm sitting here in my small apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life I once lived, and I can't help but reflect on the journey that brought me here. It's been a long and winding road, filled with love, heartbreak, and a lot of soul-searching. But to truly understand how I got to this point, I need to take you back to the very beginning. I was 25 when I first met Daniel. He was everything I thought I wanted in a man, tall, handsome, and brimming with confidence. We met at a mutual friend's wedding. I was a bridesmaid, and he was the best man. I remember the moment we locked eyes across the room, how my heart skipped a beat. There was something about him, a magnetic pull that drew me in. That night, we danced together, talked for hours, and before I knew it, I was smitten. Daniel had this way of making me feel special, like I was the only woman in the room. He would say all the right things, make all the right moves, and I fell for him, hard. We started dating soon after, and everything moved quickly from there. Daniel was a man with a plan. He had his life mapped out, and I was swept up in his vision of the future. He proposed to me just a year after we started dating. It was a beautiful, sunny day in the park where we had our first date. He got down on one knee, pulled out a ring, and asked me to be his wife. I was over the moon. I didn't hesitate for a second before saying yes. It felt like everything was falling into place, like I was living in a fairy tale. Our wedding day was like something out of a dream. I remember the way he looked at me as I walked down the aisle in my white dress, the way his eyes sparkled with love and devotion. We exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other forever. In that moment, I truly believed we would. The early years of our marriage were like a dream come true. We were so in love, so full of hope and excitement for the future. We traveled the world together, visiting places I had only ever seen in pictures. We climbed the Eiffel Tower in Paris, rode gondolas in Venice, and walked hand in hand along the beaches of Bali. It felt like nothing could ever come between us. Daniel was ambitious, and I admired that about him. He was always planning for our future, setting goals and working hard to achieve them. He had big dreams, and I was more than happy to support him in any way I could. We were a team, partners in every sense of the word. I thought that as long as we had each other, we could conquer anything. But as the years went by, things began to change. Daniel became more and more consumed by his work. He was climbing the corporate ladder, determined to reach the top, and that meant long hours at the office, late nights and weekends spent catching up on work. I tried to be understanding, to be the supportive wife he needed, but it wasn't easy. I started to feel lonely, neglected, like I was slowly losing the man I had fallen in love with. Our conversations, once full of laughter and shared dreams, became strained and tense. We started arguing, at first over small things like household chores or finances, but soon those arguments grew more intense, more frequent. We were no longer the couple who could talk for hours about anything and everything. We were two people living under the same roof, but drifting further apart with each passing day. During this difficult time, I met Mark. He was a friend of a friend, someone I hadn't really noticed before, but who suddenly became a lifeline when I was drowning in my own loneliness. Mark was kind, attentive, and most importantly, he listened. He didn't just hear me. He really listened to what I was saying, to what I was feeling. In him, I found the emotional connection I had been missing for so long. It started innocently enough. We would meet for coffee, chat about our lives, and gradually I began to open up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else. I confided in him about my struggles with Daniel, about how lonely and disconnected I felt in my marriage. Mark was supportive, understanding, and always seemed to know exactly what to say to make me feel better. But as time went on, our friendships started to blur the lines. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help the feelings that were growing inside me. Mark was everything Daniel wasn't at that time: caring, patient, and most of all, present. He was there when I needed someone, and I started to lean on him more and more. It wasn't long before our relationship turned into something more than just friendship. We began seeing each other secretly, stealing moments whenever we could. For a while, I felt alive again, like I had found a piece of myself that had been missing for so long. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I was torn between the life I had built with Daniel and the new feelings I couldn't ignore. Eventually, the truth came out, as it always does. Daniel found out about Mark, and everything came crashing down. The confrontation was explosive. Daniel was furious, and rightfully so. He felt betrayed, hurt, and angry. But he wasn't the only one. I was angry too. Angry that he had pushed me away, that he hadn't been there when I needed him the most. We shouted, we cried, we said things to each other that can never be taken back. The trust we had once shared was shattered, and with it, the love that had held us together. We tried to salvage what we could, to work through our issues in counseling, but it was too late. The damage had been done. We were both too hurt, too broken to find our way back to each other. Living under the same roof became unbearable. Every conversation turned into an argument. Every glance was filled with resentment. The home we had once built together, filled with love and laughter, became a battleground. We both knew that we couldn't go on like this, that something had to give. So, after months of trying to make things work, we made the difficult decision to separate. I remember the day I moved out. It was a cold, gray morning. I packed my things, one box at a time, and with each item I placed in the car, a piece of my heart broke a little more. I was leaving behind the life I had dreamed of, the man I had once loved so deeply. But I knew it was the only way forward. Staying would only prolong the pain. Starting over was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I felt like I had lost everything: my marriage, my home, my sense of self. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, far enough away from the memories that haunted me, but close enough to still feel their presence. Mark and I tried to make a go of it, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. But the weight of everything that had happened was too much for us to bear. Our relationship, born out of loneliness and desperation, couldn't withstand the reality of our situation. We eventually went our separate ways, and I found myself alone once again. The loneliness was overwhelming at times. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I replayed the events in my mind over and over, trying to figure out where I had made the wrong turn, what I could have done differently. The guilt and regret weighed heavily on me, and there were days when it felt like I would never be able to move forward. But slowly, I began to heal. I started to focus on myself, on figuring out who I was outside of a relationship, outside of being someone's wife or someone's lover. I began to rediscover the things that made me happy, the things I had lost along the way. I took up painting again, something I had loved to do before life got in the way. I started taking long walks in the park, enjoying the simple pleasure of being outside, of feeling the sun on my face and the breeze in my hair. I also started to reconnect with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the years I had been so wrapped up in my marriage. They welcomed me back with open arms, and I realized how much I had missed them, how much I had missed the person I used to be before everything got so complicated. In the years that followed, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I am stronger than I ever thought I could be, that I am capable of surviving heartbreak and loss and coming out the other side a better person. I learned that it's okay to make mistakes, to fail, and to pick yourself up and try again. Most importantly, I learned that I don't need someone else to define me, to make me feel whole. I spent a lot of time reflecting on my marriage, on the choices I had made, and the role I had played in its downfall. I realized that I had lost myself in my relationship with Daniel, that I had become so focused on being the perfect wife that I had forgotten who I was, what I wanted, and what made me happy. I had placed all my happiness in his hands, and when he couldn't live up to my expectations, I had turned to someone else to fill that void. But I've come to understand that true happiness doesn't come from someone else. It comes from within, from knowing who you are and being okay with that. I've learned to love myself again, to be content with my own company, and to find joy in the simple things in life. I still think about Daniel sometimes, about the life we had and the life we could have had. I wonder if things could have turned out differently if we had made different choices, if we had tried harder to understand each other. But I know now that we weren't meant to be. We were two people who came together at a time when we needed each other, but who ultimately grew apart. Now, as I sit here in my small apartment, surrounded by the memories of a life that once was, I feel a sense of peace. I've made my peace with the past, with the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned. I've forgiven myself for the things I did wrong, and I've forgiven Daniel for the things he did too. Life doesn't always go as planned, and that's okay. I've learned to embrace the uncertainty, to roll with the punches, and to keep moving forward. I'm stronger now, more resilient, and ready for whatever comes next. This is my story, a story of love, loss, and rediscovery. It's a story of finding myself again after losing everything I thought I wanted. And as I look to the future, I do so with hope in my heart, knowing that I am enough, just as I am.